Welcome to the January webinar. I'm Mark Murrell, President of CarriersEdge, and I'm joined today by Courtney Muir, our Director of Customer Experience. And we are going to be talking about the always exciting topic of launching online training successfully, aka rolling out e-learning to everybody. The session today is going to be a little bit different than the various other times when I've done this in the past. This is a session that I've done in one form or another for a few years now. And what we're going to do a little bit differently this time is, rather than just having me yap about generic best practices in e-learning rollout or system implementation, Courtney's going to bring in experiences from the customer experience world. So best practices that the customer support team have seen, things that they've learned, and all of their advice as well. So it should be a very interesting conversation for us today. Welcome, Courtney.
Thanks, Mark. I'm excited.
All right. Now, the other housekeeping that I should be doing here, as always, we have everybody set to mute by default when they join, but if you have questions, feel free to use the chat or unmute and ask your question. Or what else have we got? We've also got the hand raise feature. You can use the reaction hand raise thing and let us know that you've got a question. It is being recorded, so everybody will get a copy of that recording after the fact. If you have to duck out early, or if you're so enthralled by the discussion that you want to go back and watch it again, I'm sure there is somebody who does that. Okay, so rolling out online training, how to have best chance at success when doing this. There's really three things that I think we're going to talk about today, or three main areas to focus on. One is where to start. So what to think about before you even get started with it. The second part is having a communication plan and actually doing the rollout. And then the third part is organizing the specifics of the training, planning your schedule, and setting objectives. So we'll go through each of those things, and this will be a fairly loose conversation where we talk about some of the things that people commonly miss, or things that are kind of surprises for them. Does that match what we discussed when we prepped it?
Yes, it does. And I think since we do have some regular customers in on the webinar, I think this was mentioned on the last one as well. If anybody has any other points to bring up, or something that we kind of go over that you want more details on, or anything like that, like Mark mentioned earlier, the chat, or the hand raise feature, anything like that, feel free to jump in. We're more than happy to have participation from everybody attending.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, they got a few people that are still coming in through the waiting room, but I think we can get started. So first thing to think about when we are rolling out online training, and this is stuff that really is kind of common to any sort of system rollout. So if you're putting in a driver scorecard or doing a custom mobile app for your drivers, a new HR system, same kind of things really apply. And the first thing that you want to think about is who's actually getting access to this, and how are they going to get that access? So when we're talking about driver training, most obviously drivers are going to get access, but it doesn't just have to be drivers. It could also be other people in the company. There's other groups that could benefit from that as well. So we want to keep that in mind, that it might be the shop, it might be office people. Definitely consider having the dispatch people involved as well. The more people that are involved, the more consistent messaging you'll have across the fleet, the more people will be up to speed and sort of on the same page as far as the content goes. So when we are getting everybody sort of prepped, one of the first things we have to think about is, how are they actually going to connect? How are they going to get logged in? How are they going to access this? And one of the biggest challenges that we see here is when we are having people get started. When we sign up new customers, one of the first things that the support team does is add in all of the users. But there's always a challenge getting a good list of actual drivers, current drivers. And like, I remember in the early days when I would be expecting people to send me an Excel file, and they would send me like a scan of a printed list or something. There was dispatch systems that would only print it out. You couldn't export it to Excel or anything like that. So
we still get those.
really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Or people who, have struggled to get a current list. So here's the driver list as of 2 weeks ago or something like that. So as you're starting to plan for it, think about getting a good list. So think about getting a current list. And along the way, I think that's a good opportunity to think about building a process where you can keep that fresh. Because one of the things that comes up over time is, if this is the list of people that you start with, well, 3 months from now, that's probably not going to be your list of drivers. You need to add people, you need to delete them. So there's going to need to be a process there for updating that and maintaining the list of users. At the same time, I would also think about something that we talk about a fair bit, is the whole business of who has what technology available. And I think you guys probably talk about that a fair bit in support when you're running through it with people. So what sorts of things do you share? What are the best practices, or what do you ask them, when you're prepping for rollouts with that?
I mean, primarily the main source of notifications coming from our system are going to be email addresses. So when a new customer onboards with us, we'll get that driver's list, which can just be their first and last names, but we encourage customers to provide email addresses for their drivers. Most of the time you're seeing this as personal emails. There's not a ton of companies out there that provide corporate emails for their drivers. So again, as Mark said, when you're preparing that list, it's something you might need to be ready for, because the details might not be something that you have regularly stored in your system for these drivers. So email addresses are important. We do give customers the opportunity of whether or not they want emails to go out as soon as they sign up, or whether that's going to go out later on with things like login details. So having the driver's emails are important right off the bat, even if you don't want them to know about the program just yet. It's good to have them in there, especially when you have that opportunity on setup to get all of the information in the system from our support team, as opposed to having to go in and add all of those drivers or any additional details, the email addresses and that for the drivers later on. Take advantage of the opportunity during the setup. The other thing is that with the mobile apps, we do have push notifications. So we do get a lot of questions where people will ask if they can just notify drivers of their training or deadlines and that type of thing using the app, which can be a great resource as long as the push notifications are going to the drivers.
And they're turned on. Yeah.
They're turned on because they can turn off notifications for any given app on their phones unless they are, we've come across a few situations where their company provided equipment that they're utilizing, especially if it's like the app on a tablet on their ELD system or something like that, where they're accessing, then you have a little bit more control. But having those emails and being able to notify the drivers that way, when they don't have it, then you've really got to think about how are you going to let them know. So
you touched on a couple of things there that I want to go back to. And so the first one is something that you're just talking about is company provided devices. And that brings up the idea of thinking about how people are going to access it. So we've talked about who's getting access, how are they going to access it, and from where. So when you're thinking about an online training rollout, are you expecting that drivers are going to be doing it on a machine in your office? Are you expecting that they're going to be using their own personal computers at home, a mobile device, something that they have in cab? And what is your current situation? This is one of the things that we generally recommend that people start with pretty early, is start to build a profile of what the fleet looks like. How many drivers are taking tablets or smartphones with them? I can't imagine there's anybody who's not taking a smartphone with them, but maybe there is. Who has access at home, who doesn't, who's got good quality internet, not just a machine or a device of some sort, but they've also got good quality internet connectivity. How many people would benefit from having a common area machine that they can use somewhere? So start thinking about that stuff, because that's usually where I've seen people kind of stumble or get sort of a hurdle when they get to do the rollout is they're all ready. They kind of know where they want to start. They know what training they want to do. And then it's like, okay, well, how are people actually going to access it? Oh, turns out that only half of our drivers have connectivity. So what are we going to do? And they have to go and buy a computer or something like that. So think about that early. Definitely, I would say it's a best practice to get people started at the very beginning on something that you have control over. So maybe it's a machine that you have set up in your driver lounge. Maybe it is your standard issue kind of tablet, like a GeoTab or something like that that you're giving people, something that you have control over. And the reason for that is that you want people to have the best possible experience in the beginning. And you don't want that experience to be hampered by somebody trying it on their crappy old PC at home, or like their tiny 3-inch screen smartphone that barely has any power and has no storage on it or something. So you don't want those things to get in the way of your rollout. So the more you can control what that experience is like, the better it's going to be for those initial drivers. And they're critical to the success of the rollout, as we'll talk about later, how to leverage those early users. But we definitely want to provide the best possible experience for them that we can. So something that you can control. And no problem after the fact rolling it out and saying, hey, everybody use whatever device you want. But if you do that on day one, just Murphy's Law, the first 5 people that try and connect are going to be on some garbage machine and they're going to complain about it. So like, don't add that headache that you don't need. So start with something that you can control and then move on from there. You also mentioned communication and whether or not people should be notified right away. Now that's a really good point. We'll come back to communication plans in a bit. But by default, when we set up new users, they get notified that there's an account. So we want to be thinking about that. And what is the communication plan? When do those users get added? Do they actually get that notice? I mean, we can certainly turn it off, but it is something that we want to talk about. Do they get the notice? Should we be doing other communication in advance of that so that they're ready for it? That's a really good observation as well, is that you don't necessarily have to get notified, but it can be very useful, for sure.
Well, I don't know how many times after a rollout with a new customer where welcome messages are sent out, but the drivers have no idea that this is coming. And then that's when all the emails come in going, what is this? I don't have anything I need to do. Or they're maybe a little more tech savvy and they did go in and install the app and logged in, goes, well, there's nothing here for me to do. There's no training assigned yet. So it's definitely a good idea to make sure that they're aware before we start sending them any type of communication.
Yeah. And you also mentioned the whole business of email addresses, and we've got the idea of logins and passwords and what are all of those things going to be. So that's something you want to think about early on as well, because we're going to create these accounts and they need to be communicated, but what username are the drivers going to log in with? What password are they going to use? 99% of the other services on the internet, you log in with your email address. But if you haven't issued corporate email addresses to drivers, that's not really an option. So we see a lot of people that want to use like the old satellite code, first 3 letters of the first name and last name. And that can mostly work, but that's not necessarily unique to the company. So we have to have something in our system that is going to be unique. So it will be some combination of company code and individual's name, or could be job description or driver code or something like that. We've got a whole ton of options, but it is something that's worth thinking about fairly early on, because you want to have something that is going to be pretty easy for drivers to remember. So it should be something that they're using already, which is why driver codes are good, why email addresses typically work very well, but something that is familiar. And even the company code, we generally use whatever the company's existing shorthand is. So you're going to have a short 2, 3, 5-letter version of your company code that you normally use, or your company name. And so that's what we'll use as well. And from that, create a format that we can use to generate the logins. But it's also definitely recommended to create a format where everybody can follow the same format, because you don't want to have to be looking up like these sort of randomly generated passwords for every single user, that just can create a huge nightmare. Way easier to say it's going to be company code dot first name dot last name, and the password is your driver ID. And that's really easy to communicate. Drivers will understand what it is. Each driver will have their own version of that, but they'll be able to figure out what it is. And when that driver messes it up or can't log in or whatever, you'll be able to help them very easily. You're not having to go and look at some randomly generated password in some master list anywhere, or getting them to do a password reset or any of those kind of things. You want to minimize those headaches. So pick something that is going to be kind of consistent within the company, easy to remember, but somewhat distinct as well. So is that how you are typically recommending it for new customers now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the other thing to mention with that too is that the accounts give you the ability of whether or not your drivers can actually change their own passwords or not. So that's something to take into consideration. You don't want to go through all that work of figuring out what passwords are going to be consistent across the company and familiar to the drivers, and then have them all log in and reset it to something that you don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's so funny that, best practices in security often run up against the practicality of managing a fleet of drivers. So if I look at how other systems work now, and we have a variety of systems that we use internally, and pretty much all of them work the same way. You don't create a full account for somebody. You just enter their email address and they get an invite to go in and create their own profile, enter their own password. A lot of times they can add an avatar or something like that if they want, but they're doing all the work on their own. And that just would not work at all for the fleet of drivers, because you need to be able to track what they're doing. We see more often than not that they're using fairly basic passwords like driver ID or job code or something like that, and preventing drivers from changing it, because otherwise it gets to be unmanageable. So yeah, the objective here is to minimize the support headaches when you start rolling it out and drivers start trying to get in there and use it. So we definitely want to find something that is going to be easy for people to use, easy to remember, but also easy for you to manage.
Yeah. Driver codes are a great one. I know we've seen a few more companies recently who are opting for a combination of the driver code, depending on how long it is. Some customers only have a 3 or 4 digit number that's assigned to the driver. So they'll do a combination of, say, their driver code and the last 3 or 4 digits of their social security number or their SIN number, something that really only the driver is going to know.
Right.
So that's a good one too.
Yeah, I've seen that driver's license numbers, part of a driver's license number or something like that in there.
Yeah,
that could be really good.
The only other thing too is in some cases, depending on the level of security that the company wants, because a password hint is sent out and not the actual password itself, you want to keep that in mind when you're entering in, especially new customers after you, or new drivers after you've rolled out, that you want that password hint to be simple as well. So, I mean, we do still see people that will put the actual password in the password hints, but things like, because what it will send out will say your password is, and whatever you put in that field is what's going to be sent to the driver. So your password is, your driver code is perfect, is your driver code and the last 4 digits of your SIN or your SSN, things like that. But the password hint is really important, because if you're not available to help the drivers, then that's what the support team is using to send out the details if they've come to us to try and get themselves logged in.
Very good. Yeah, very good point. All right, that kind of leads into the next section that we wanted to talk about, and probably the most important part of it, which is communicating the whole thing, communicating it to drivers. How do you get them on side? How do you get them as excited about it as they can be? How do you get them thinking positively about it and ready to have a success with it? And there are some things that are pretty simple, but if you understand where drivers are coming from, you can do it with pretty minimal headaches. So the biggest thing that I see as a success factor here is to position it as something that is actually of value to the drivers. And that's a little bit of a shift in mindset. A lot of times, sort of traditionally in the trucking industry, training has been seen as kind of a chore or sort of a punishment. So there's that mindset that you have to do training, or you get stuck in training. And we want to sort of shift that and we get people thinking about it as professional development, as helping them to improve efficiency, improve their safety, keep learning. I mean, there's so much new stuff happening in the industry. You really got to stay on top of that in order to be successful as a driver. So that's how we want to position as a company making an investment in drivers so that they can be better at their jobs, be safer, be more efficient, and have a better experience. And when we position it like that, we tend to get a better response from drivers. You position it as, all right, you guys have screwed up for the last time, so now you're getting online training. Well, nobody wants that. That's not exciting. So you position it as, okay, we're investing in something. Everybody knows we've got to do training, reg changes, best practices. Insurance people always want to see lots of training. So we know we got to do it. How can we make it as efficient as possible? Okay, we're doing it online. That's in many ways, that's a plus for the drivers on its own because they can do it without losing their weekends, without having to come off the road. They can do it when it's convenient for them. So the kind of the core value proposition of online training should work for the driver as well. It's like you get this training, you're not giving up driving time, you're not giving up your weekend, you can do it when you like, you can go at your own pace, like all of those things are pluses. All right, that sounds good. So where's the headache then? Well, the headache often ends up being people that are scared. If you think about sort of the main things that people think about, the priorities for the driver, they want to maximize their income, they want to maximize their driving time, maximize their home time, and also not look stupid in front of their peers. Nobody wants to look stupid in front of their peers. But if you start saying we're going to roll out some new technology and it's new safety training and it's going to be very thorough and it's going to be in depth and make sure that you know the regulations, there's going to be some element of the fleet that is nervous. And it might be somebody who doesn't have great technology and is worried about whether they'll be able to access it. It might be somebody who thinks that they're maybe going to be perceived as weaker, or maybe they're not going to do that well and it's going to reflect badly on them. They may be sort of older drivers or the more seasoned drivers that are concerned about looking dumb. All of those things could just derail the thing completely because they're not ever going to say, I'm nervous about looking dumb. I'm worried that I'm not going to do well. They're always going to say, we don't need this. I've been driving for 20 years. You don't need some computer to tell me what the hours of service are. Yeah, that's how it's always going to be positioned. So you got to be proactive and head that off. So what we always tell people to do is recognize that fear is out there and avoid it. So head it off proactively by recognizing where the fear is coming from. And if it's always coming from a fear of failure, then when you communicate the program, communicate it in such a way that makes it clear that you're going to support all of these people, makes it clear that you're going to make sure everyone has access. And that's why in the beginning, we were talking about figure out who has what access and how we're going to get it out to them. So that when you communicate it, you can then say, we've got this new program. It's going to give people all the safety training and best practices training that they need. It's going to be a whole bunch of new content. You don't have to come off the road. You don't have to give up your weekend. And we're going to make sure everybody has access. We're putting it out on the Geo tabs, or they're on the Zonar or the Isaac tablets, whatever. We're putting a new machine in the driver's lounge so everybody can have access to it. And for anybody who's unsure, we're going to work with you individually to make sure you have a success. All of a sudden, there's a lot less things to be scared of there. That fear can be dissipated quite a bit. But that is also where you come back to your initial users, those pilot people. You got them, those first few people that you had in there that were trying it, get them to talk about their experiences and position it as something that's been good. So you get your senior drivers to do some testimonials, to look at what they've been doing and talk about their experiences. That can really help as well. So, and that's kind of change management 101 for any kind of new system. You always figure out where the fear is coming from, proactively address it, and get some testimonials, some early successes that you can make part of your communication plan. And that's going to help people to get comfortable with it and sort of avoid those issues. And you probably have a good sense of who those drivers are that are going to be most useful in terms of spreading the word or building credibility, and also who are the drivers that are most likely to have concerns or be nervous about it. And you can deal with those individually, get those out of the way. So that's kind of the generic stuff about building a communication plan, but into specifics of how people are doing it, what you're seeing in terms of best practices within the community. What kind of things are you seeing customers doing now?
I think it's part of the reason why these webinars are really important, because we don't see as much of it as we would like. But because like I said, that groundwork that we talked about at the beginning is a step that a lot of people tend to miss. You know, it's easy to go online, find a product or a service that you think that you can use as a manager or as a, you know, as the admin of that system, and dive right in because you're excited about it and get it going, forgetting about your audience. So a lot of the times we are encouraging new customers to follow some of these best practices. When we check and see whether a welcome message goes out, we're asking questions like, do the drivers know this is coming? You know, have you put out any announcement? Have you mentioned it at a meeting? Like, you know, especially with some smaller carriers, it doesn't need to be a big mail list that you send out to inform everybody. But you definitely need to let them know what's coming. And like Mark mentioned, it's going to give you a lot more control over how it's going to be perceived when you send that out. So a lot of the times we're finding that customers aren't sending out the welcome emails because they want some time with the system themselves. Right. So they want the drivers in there so that they can make sure everything's in order before they assign that first set of training or that first module. So they leave the welcome message until they're ready to roll it out. We don't have a ton of insight into what the companies are doing internally to inform the drivers, but I do see that trend of the setup isn't the official launch. The setup is.
That's sorry to interrupt you, but you just raised a really good point. And it's hitting with me because we're just in the middle of scoring this year's best fleets to drive for. This mountain of all of the responses of what the fleets are doing, what are the best practices, what are the things that are working. And one of the questions that I was involved in scoring yesterday was the question about how fleets evaluate and decide on new technology. And it's really about this, you know, you've got a scorecard, you've got a training system, an HR system. How are you making those decisions and making sure that it works for everybody? And we added the question because we found a few years ago that lots of fleets were just kind of making the decision on their own. And it's really morphed in the past couple of years to the point where drivers are pretty much always involved now. That's kind of the standard, is that drivers are involved somehow, whether it's piloting it, whether it's evaluating different options, a proof of concept, whatever the case may be. But it's definitely something that I would say is worth pushing out into this area as well. So yes, you say they do the initial setup and the admins want to be in there. So your safety manager wants to be in there playing around. That makes perfect sense. I love that idea, but include some drivers as well. Whether you've got a driver advisory board, or you've got driver liaisons, even if you've got some senior driver, there's somebody in that fleet that is the person everyone looks up to. Get that person involved early on. The more that those people are involved, the more you're going to have success. Absolutely leverage their expertise, because they can help as well, identifying places where there might be challenges, or identifying fellow drivers that they think may do really well or may have struggles. Take advantage of their presence to really make sure that you're set up for success.
Absolutely. I mean, we've even had, I know recently, a couple experiences where like a prospect, somebody looking into our system as their solution, ask for trial accounts for some of their drivers, gets them exposure to the platform, to the different ways that they can access it. And really, most importantly, is the content itself, because if your drivers don't like the content, they're not going to pay attention. So the same way that we encourage admins to go and take a look at some of the courses and make sure this works for your fleet, well, what better way of finding out if it works for your fleet than getting the feedback directly from the drivers?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a great idea. So you've got your communication plan, you've got some drivers that are ready, that have tried it out and given you some good feedback, and you played around in the system a little bit and you have some thoughts on what you want to do. where do you see it going from there? What are the next steps typically?
Well, I mean, the next thing is to figure out how you want to roll things out. So you've done your groundwork, you've got the data, you've made sure you're supporting all the drivers. Everybody is going to be able to access this. So what is it that they're going to be accessing? What
What are they doing first?
Yeah, what do you want to start off with? And I think this is a challenge for a lot of fleets, unless they happen to have a program or they're coming from another platform. Just 1 second. They don't know what content they want to give out to the drivers. And it's an extensive library, especially with our system. And so one of the first things that we encourage once you're in the platform is to start looking through the content yourself. And this goes back to deciding who has access to this, because along with your drivers and your main admin, I mean, if you have managers, they definitely should be in there. Give them the opportunity to take a look through the content and even consider whether they should have to complete the courses that the drivers are completing. But you really need to get familiar with the content that you have available to you and how that fits into what you want to do, looking at the first couple of months and then looking at the long term. I'd say that is really the next step once you've figured out and you know how you're going to communicate and you know how to get everybody on board. And it kind of makes sense that now you need to put that all together.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I see this particularly with the smaller fleets that are moving online for the first time. You know, if you haven't been online before, training options have been pretty limited. You get people in orientation, you may do a driver meeting periodically, or there's some video or something like that. But all of a sudden now you've got 100+ different titles. It can be, in some ways, it can be intimidating. In other ways, it can be like the kid in the candy store, where you just want to go nuts. So what do? You know, where do you start with that? And I think, you know, whenever I'm presented with a large list like that, I end up with option anxiety. Like I can't pick, because, you know, if I pick this one, I can't pick this one, but I can pick this one, then I don't know if that's the right one. So I think there are some common areas that are definitely worth thinking about, or processes to use to figure out what's going to be the best place to start. And I don't know if I would necessarily start with some hardcore regulatory or deeply technical course. Like, I don't know if I would necessarily put everybody into vehicle inspection or weights and dimensions or something that is very technical that way. It might be a better plan to put people into something that is going to be a little bit lighter, but still useful for them, and easier, because you can, you know, when you first start with it, you also got to figure out, is everybody getting logged in okay? How does this process work in terms of assigning it, or notifications and reminders? You've got that whole business of getting the company used to the process. So you don't necessarily want to be focused on, oh my God, everybody has to go through this course, you know, immediately so that we can fix our safety record or something like that. Yes, there's absolutely benefit to doing that, and you want to get people in those safety courses, but there's definitely value in something like fuel efficiency or distracted driving that's a little bit more, well, I don't want to say it's lighter because it is fairly serious content, or maybe mental health or wellness or something like that, fatigue. Some of these things that are going to be much more newer content for drivers. You're not going to have as many of the drivers saying, I don't need this because I already know it because I've been driving forever. They tend to be a little bit more responsive for some of those lighter titles. And then that allows you to kind of figure out the process and get comfortable with the whole thing internally. And then after that, you can get into the more detailed stuff, or do things like use the baseline test to figure out where the knowledge gaps are, and then put people into the courses that apply. So you don't necessarily start with the heaviest stuff right away. Yeah, but I do see that some of these people, they get access to it and they just don't know where to start. It's like, what do I do? There's so much here. Where do I start?
You really need to kind of ease into it. Like there's no rush to get everything done right away. So I mean, not only for the sake of the drivers and getting them used to how things are being done and what the expectations are for them with this, but also as administrators or managers that are learning a new system, you're still getting familiar with how the system itself works and then how that fits into your business processes, and works with your drivers. But really, you take that time in the beginning to familiarize yourself with that and figure out what works well for everyone else. And that's going to make the rest of the program, as you go through it, say throughout the rest of the year, move a lot smoother for you. And we do a lot of training initially. We do ongoing training and support. I mean, there's a lot, and this kind of speaks to a lot of different systems. There's usually a lot to it. You're not going to be able to dig into all of the features, all of the content, everything that's available to you in the first 3 months. It's just, you're setting yourself up to fail in that case. And exactly. a lot of carriers don't necessarily have somebody dedicated to it. So you need to find how it's going to work well for you without it being a burden on all the other things that you need to get done in a day. Where can I automate? Where can I schedule? Where can I spend a half a day getting everything built and know that it's going to take care of itself? The options are there. So if you know what you want to do, as far as a program goes, not specific to any particular software, when you get started, you can take opportunity from the training that's offered to you, the support team that's available to you, learn what you need to know to get that started, and know that you're setting a really good foundation for how this is going to proceed, because you have a picture, at least a general picture of what you want it to look like in the beginning.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're kind of seeing what I've noted in the past as well, is that the companies that have the best success with it, in the first quarter, they almost focus less on the specifics of the content. It's more about the process. Yes. It's more about figuring out, like you're talking about, the administrative side and recognizing that there isn't a dedicated person managing it most of the time. And that's great. We've designed our system to be fairly easy, and you shouldn't have to spend a lot of time getting comfortable with it when you log back in again, the next month or whatever. And like you say, there are a lot of things to automate there, but it does take a little bit of thought in the beginning to kind of figure out, where do you want to automate things? What do you want to do? How do you fit this into your schedule? And I don't want that to sound like we're dumping that on people, because I think your point is that the support team is there and they will work with everybody. They've seen this before, and they're happy to work with people to figure out what's going to be best for them, make suggestions, recommend things, and kind of take everybody through that process of getting ready to have this as part of their business. Mm-hmm. Right? So then it makes sense, because as a business, you're changing your process, you're adding some new things, and you need to build new habits among the admin people, but also among all of the drivers. The drivers have to get used to going in and doing things and completing the stuff. And we've got a lot of tools for reminders and things like that to help them. But on the admin side as well, you have to build these new habits and get used to doing things. And that takes some time. So if the focus of the first quarter is building those habits and along the way completing some content, then you're going to be in a really good shape. You're going to be ready to kind of take it to the next level and really launch it in the sort of second quarter, something like that.
I think a lot of times customers feel like when they're getting enrolled in a system like ours, that they have to have everything ready the second it's set up. You have to have, I need a program for this, I need a program for that, I need 20 courses in this program, I need 10 courses in this program, and eventually maybe it will look like that. But when you're starting off, like, all the things that Mark has said are excellent recommendations. Start off with, maybe a bit lighter content, a bit shorter modules, something just to get them. It's more about getting into the habit of being online once a month, or whatever your term is, to get that completed before there's something that's really important that you want them to get done. When, it's September and you want winter driving completed before the next month, you have time before that to be able to give them an introduction to what they're going to have to do going forward. So you can always start a little bit. You can build them and have them available, but we really don't recommend sending out a module or a program with, 10 modules in it the first assignment that you're giving to the drivers.
Oh God,
I mean,
yeah.
you want to talk about the gripe you're going to get from the ones that aren't happy about it in the first place. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And like I said, it doesn't need to be a big rush to the finish line. You can, if you look at what you can send out in the course of even 12 months, rolling things out little by little and building on that, you can get a lot accomplished in a year.
Absolutely. And that leads into the idea that it's not just about dumping out all of this training. Like we've talked a fair bit about building the habits and sort of thinking about the process on the admin side, along with what the drivers are doing. But it's not just about the content as well. It's about taking advantage of what you get from that content. So people take those courses, then what? You just dump another course out next month? Well, no, that doesn't end up working very well for the fleet. And that's why we have the put it into practice as well, all of those exercises that give people different activities that they can follow on, which really help to build the habits for the drivers, because now it's not just take a course, it is take a course and then next month we've got a survey, or we're doing some social media thing, or it's now getting built into the bonus program or something. There's all of these different tools that help people build those habits around completing the content, but also thinking about the content, getting engaged with the business on that particular subject, and then improving the safety profile over the long term as a result of that. So yeah, think about all of those different things. And yeah, the put into practice or PIPs, they're pretty new, but they come out of, it's another thing that comes out of the best fleets to drive for, what we saw people doing that was working really well to build their safety program. And it wasn't always just about all of that content. It was about having a longer approach to it. So maybe this quarter, our focus is on air brakes. Next quarter, our focus is going to be on, I don't know, some other thing that is a real issue, is on fall protection. So you have these kind of themes, and then you have the content that goes around it. You have some of the other activities, and through that, you can really build the habits, and through that, build the safety performance of the fleet. Yeah, the people that are kind of most at risk of having a failed launch are the people that dump everything on the driver in the beginning. Like it's the kid in the candy store model where, okay, the drivers have got like 6 full-length courses and they've been given a month to do it. Well, that's just a chore for them. They're not going to enjoy it. They're not going to get anything out of it. It's just going to stress them out trying to get it finished. So we want to step it back a little bit, give them time to get things finished, give them time to get used to it, and time to think about what they've learned and to apply it. That's where you get the real benefits.
Mm-hmm. And that applies to the administrative side. Like I said, not every company, the person who's responsible for that or the people that are responsible for that won't necessarily have a lot of time to dedicate to this all the time. So the same way that, a lack of driver adoption and overwhelming your drivers can cause you to abandon a program like that, it works the same way with the people who are running the program. If you have these grand ambitions of all this training and all these courses, and in 3 months our ratings are going to be fantastic, but then you get in there and you only have 5 minutes to put something together and get it out to the drivers, it's going to be so overwhelming, and you're not going to do that. And so, we try our best in the support department, following up with new customers, checking on accounts, looking for activity, and then trying to help get that rolling out, especially during that first 3 months. But a lot of times it's the companies that come with really grand ambitions that may not quite fit into their day-to-day processes that don't end up getting it rolled out at all. So
interesting.
Yeah. So taking it easy not only helps the drivers get used to it, but gives you the opportunity to get used to it and figure out what your own process is, because there's lots of fantastic tools, reporting. There's lots of ways that the system can help you, but you need to know how it's going to work for what you want to get done.
Yeah, I remember way back when I used to do walkthroughs with people, I would always focus more on the kind of startup, the creation of programs and the assignments. And then I just give a very basic overview of the reports. And then I would say, okay, let's talk again in a month after you've got some data in there, then we'll dig into the reports. because you can't do it all at once. It's kind of like, in some ways, it's like a normal orientation. You go in, you meet like all of these new people, you learn all these new processes, and tomorrow you've forgotten it all. So it's sort of the same thing. If we try and do too much at the beginning, okay, here's how you do program setup, here's all of the new things that you can be doing, and here's how all reporting works, well, it's all lost. People, take your time on the admin side, recognize that it's going to take some time to get used to it. And even if you only have 20 minutes a month, that's okay. We can work with that. And through that, we will get you going. And, the first month you get some assignments, you get it out there. Second month, you start looking at the reporting and what you can do with that and how that works. Third month, you're starting to put all of the pieces together and build on it from there. So I think that's a really good observation, that people need to not just be thinking about their drivers, but they need to be fair to themselves as well. Everybody is busy, and we recognize that people are not spending all day administering an e-learning system. As much as we would love that, we recognize where we fit in the grand scheme of things in terms of priorities. So there was one other thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit. You said something when we were reviewing this yesterday that I thought was really cool. You said it's never too late to fix a rollout.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, we are constantly following up, we follow up regularly with all of our customers. So when somebody calls or emails to check in and see how things are going, be honest about it. If things haven't worked out the way you wanted to, if you just haven't had enough time, if, an audit came in and how do I get this out and get everything ready for an audit, there's nothing wrong with that. That's life. So when you check in, or even when you feel like I have a second to breathe, I haven't looked at this, I can't remember anything that Nina or Amber or somebody showed me a month ago, we're always there. Like I have worked in multiple customer service departments in different industries, and I've always been impressed with our team and how available that we are. Like, nothing has to be done all right at the beginning. So like Mark said, focus on what really needs to be done, the practical part of it, what's going to get you really rolling out, and then build on that with the other options that are in there. And if a couple months has gone by and you haven't even had a chance to look into some of these modules, or you need a refresher reminder, then by all means, you can get a hold of us and we will start from the very beginning if we need to make sure that you're getting set up for success. But I mean, even if the drivers haven't had the greatest experience, there's always a way to turn it around. Like Mark said, as much as communication is important in the beginning, if you haven't quite got that communication plan right the first time, we can try again. I mean, drivers are no different than any other people. They can be understanding. And as long as you are working on that communication plan to get the right message across, you don't have to abandon it just because it didn't work right the first time.
Yeah, I think that's a really good observation, because people kind of think, I kind of botched that, so let's just move on to something else and park it. But the business case for doing this hasn't changed. If you were doing this because you want to get people trained, you want to have less disruption for your driver training, like all of those things that make people sign up in the first place, those things probably aren't changing. And if the only thing that's happened is the communication wasn't quite right and you didn't get good adoption, well, that's fine. That's a fixable problem. Yeah, we can figure out why. We can get those drivers involved, find out what their concerns were, address those, get people ready, and turn it around. And sometimes those are the best stories, when you initially have people that are skeptical or have a bad initial experience and they don't like it, or something happens, then you talk to them and solve that problem. They become the biggest advocates. They can become the people that are screaming to everybody else to get going with it. So you absolutely have those opportunities to resolve that, even if it wasn't, it wasn't pristine in a perfect case study in a software rollout in the beginning. You can always fix that. So that's a really good observation and something that's really important to keep in mind. So, okay, so we're coming up on the end of the block here. So what are the other things that you see as sort of most common successes or pitfalls that people have when they go to do a rollout?
I think we've covered quite a bit of it. We always see more success the more prepared you are ahead of the launch. So, and even if you've come to us with this idea that I need driver training, this seems like the best option for us, but you don't really know where to go, there's no rush to get signed up. So the companies that we have a lot of communication with before that decision has even been made tend to roll out a lot smoother than someone that shows up and listen a trial and that afternoon they want the account ready. Because typically in some of those situations, we know that wasn't, you weren't really prepared. You knew what you needed, but you didn't really know what you were signing up for or how this was going to fulfill what you needed to do. I mean, sometimes it's just the insurance company said I needed it, and you're just trying to fulfill that obligation that they've given to you before you've even thought about what that means for daily operations for your drivers and that. So definitely a lot of the best practices that we talked about here, we see that in some of the best rollouts that come when they're ready and they know what they need, or they're willing to take the time in the beginning to figure that out with us. So the pitfalls, like I said, rushing it out, rushing the training it always ends up with the drivers being frustrated, or at least a portion of your drivers, maybe not everybody, but you're going to get the ones that are going to give you a hard time. And that's not only, it reflects on them, but it makes you feel bad. Like you don't want to put drivers in a position, especially if they're drivers you've had for a long time or drivers that you really trust. You need to make sure that you're maintaining that relationship with them, and you don't want this to be putting, a wrench in that gear. So I guess in conclusion, it's basically take your time when you're working on it, even if that means you've already started talking to us.
Yeah. Well, the last thing that I would add on that is make sure that the executive team is in the loop with what reasonable expectations are. So that's one of the things that I've seen is when safety managers sign up, they are excited, they have this plan, but somehow the executive have got it in their head that this is going to be some sort of magic program. And, 6 months after signing up, all of a sudden we have no crashes anymore. And our roadside inspections are dropping, never out of service or anything like that. We're all perfect. Well, it doesn't work like that. Those things can happen. And there are definitely examples where people have had massive success and seen, 75% reduction in safety costs and 95% reduction in out of service and fantastic results. But none of those things happen in a vacuum, and they don't happen overnight. So make sure that executives are in the loop with what reasonable expectations are for the first couple of quarters. And from there, you will probably be in much better shape. I think that's one of the things that pressures people a lot into rushing through it and dumping a ton of training on their drivers really fast, is they've got executives saying, okay, you can do this for 3 months, or, put everybody through all the training in 3 months and then let's cancel it and problem will be solved. Well, no, you're just creating more problems if you do that. So make sure they're in the loop with what is a reasonable plan and build from there.
And if you have that plan kind of scoped out, even though chances are in 6 months, it might change, something might come up in the fleet that requires a different approach to the training that you had in mind for that year, that's fine. You can pivot with that. But if you have a plan ahead of time, it makes it a little easier to have those conversations. And I feel that the early adoption and easing the drivers into it is probably where you will see the best return as you go later on down the road, because that foundation is what's going to lead to those improvements.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so with that, I think I'm going to sort of wrap up the formal part of it here, open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions, comments to share, and I will put up our little closing slide as well as a reminder of where to find us for support if you have any other questions.